Everybody, welcome to this afternoon's meeting. For some of you, it's very early in the morning, like Naveed sitting in New York. For some of you, it's quite late in the afternoon or evening, 7 p.m. for Jonathan in Shenzhen in China. So thank you so much for joining from all over the world. We have an exciting program in front of us today. We have our colleague, Andree Bates, who will be talking about the application of AI to pharma. Is there such a thing as an application or not? And if yes, how? Just to give you a little bit of a background about Andree, we met Andree probably more than 20 years ago. And prior to our meeting, she went on to do a PhD in neurosciences. And that PhD then led to her interest in AI and machine learning. And innovative as she is, she went and set up probably the world's first, Andree, if I'm not mistaken, a digital health agency in the 90s in Tokyo, of all the places, right? She has an incredibly colorful background, born in Papua New Guinea, of all the places, which she still refers to her as her home. And she has actually progressed since I got to know her into things which are really today what she is today, doing AI and AI's applications as well as digital health. So over to you, Andree. For just a couple of housekeeping, any questions, I suggest that we just put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box. Andree will present about 30-35 minutes, and then we will have an open forum for Q&A. But as I said, you can put the questions in the chat box and I'll be monitoring them. So without further ado, over to you, Andree.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Okay, so can pharma and biotech scale new frontiers with artificial intelligence? I think the answer is yes, but let's explore it today. So we have a very changing environment, and one of the key changes is our customers. And this is partially, I believe, from Amazon, but so many other companies out there. Customers now, and I'm talking about doctors and patients, expect immediate and personalized responses. And that's a difficult thing to do with a human workforce. Competition is coming from unusual places. And if you look at any analyst report, Google is on there as a pharma company now because of their R&D facility in San Francisco. But the other companies are also very focused in healthcare. And we have very interesting new approaches coming through and a lot in AI digital health startups coming in. I have actually, it looks like I've got nothing here, I have a video, which I'm going to have to move things again. Hold on. Lucky I have a video which I want to show you. It's just 1 minute, but I'm just going to show you some of the things that are actually being done today in healthcare with AI. So I don't know if you noticed, but from the time the blood was taken to the time of the results was 30 minutes. Now, this is not the future. This actually is being used in hospitals in Switzerland and Germany. It's also being used by CVS in the US to deliver prescriptions to the elderly contact-free. It's also being used in Japan to deliver medical emergency supplies for disaster relief. So this is actually being used all over the place currently. I'm going to show you a very different example now, but one that I think you'll see the application. Let's move it forward a bit.
Hi, I'm Amelia. It's good to speak with you today. Thanks for the interview.
Hello, Amelia. So I've got your resume in front of me here for the service desk engineer position.
Yes, I have lots of experience. Glad to talk about whatever you wish.
Says here you've got 20 years of experience with IPSoft. Is that correct?
Yes, I got my start in automation, then I moved on to other roles in IT support, and now I'm an expert in conversational AI.
You've been working for IPSoft full-time for that long?
Well, I don't mean to brag, but I work full-time 24/7, around the clock and around the world.
How do you manage that?
I don't sleep or eat, and I don't take coffee breaks or vacations. I don't have to. I'm a digital employee, so I can be anywhere I'm needed anytime.
Ooh. I'll just stop that there. But what's interesting about Amelia and digital humans is I'm working with this one for several biotechs for very different use cases. So they can do anything a human can do that doesn't require something manual, like actually physically lifting something. So as you see here, she's IT help support. She's actually taken 50% of the customer service jobs from Bank of America, and their customer satisfaction has gone up since she's been doing that. She speaks 147 languages, and I know Japanese is definitely one. She could have Chinese as well. And you know, there's just so many applications. She's being used by a large biotech for patient support as well as medical information to doctors. She's being used in a project we're doing at the moment for collecting market research data 24/7 that we can then analyze with natural language processing. So she's used for so many different applications. I can see that a lot of Salesforce components of a Salesforce job could be taken. Most jobs could be, which would then leave the humans to be there to do the high value, more creative kind of thinking about specific things. But anything that you can train someone to do, she can do. And her language, I had a tour of her brain and it was amazing. If anyone wants the video of that, let me know, because she even can context switch mid-sentence. If someone asks her something and mid-sentence changes the context, she picks up the switch and responds to the switch. So there's a lot of things that are going on that are very relevant to our space. And what do these two examples have in common? They're both using a form of artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is used all the time, the name. It's really a lot of different techniques, and I've just put a few here, but even the different techniques have sub-techniques, and even the sub-techniques have sub-techniques. So the key is really what is the type of data or data sources that you're using and what are you trying to do with it. And from that you can determine what techniques are going to be the right ones to use. But essentially, artificial intelligence is the intersection between mathematics and computing. And if you think about the human brain, when we learn a new skill, we are forming new dendritic pathways, and the more we practice that skill, the easier that skill becomes because of the pathways. Artificial intelligence is a little bit like that. It's not really the same, but where it's similar is the more data that comes into the system, the more accurate the results are going to be. And so I think, the one thing that you need to really think about when you're doing any AI is the data, because that's kind of where the make or break of most things is. If you put the wrong data in, you're going to get the wrong results. And we are seeing a lot of this bias that gets reported in the news with AI. That's because the wrong data or not a good sample of data has been put in. There was a very famous case study, Amazon, where they put resume data into their algorithms to basically predict who is going to be a very valuable employee when they're making hiring decisions. but they realized quickly that they were only hiring men, not women. And so they looked at what they'd done and they'd realized they'd only put male resumes into their training. So if a female resume came in, it was kicking it out. Then they went back and said, okay, let's take the gender box out of this. And then they still found they were only hiring men because they still hadn't put female resumes in. They thought if we just do it quick and easy. But the difference between male and female resumes was the language. And women use very different language in their resumes than men. And so you've got to think very, very carefully when you're doing any project about what are we doing with, what's in the data and how can we make sure that it's a representative, good data rather than a biased sample. So, AI is transforming most industries. It's very hard to think of an industry that isn't being transformed by AI. And actually, healthcare is probably one of the biggest. But I haven't put it in this picture because I will be discussing that for the rest of the presentation. But if you think about autonomous vehicles, even that drone we just saw, but autonomous cars, automotive is being transformed in so many ways. Even the normal car that is not autonomous has so much AI in the engine. If you think about insurance, I did a paper recently on AI in insurance. So I was looking at healthcare insurance, but every aspect of the whole process of insurance now, there are AI companies that handle it, from fraud detection to scoring to underwriting, claims processing, everything. And I also think the insurance industry is fascinating, or is going to become even more fascinating, because when you have autonomous vehicles, smart homes, sensors to detect your condition, you won't really have personal responsibility if something goes wrong with the car. I think the whole sector is going to have to change, for example, to the manufacturer, not to the individual. And then, of course, retail, which was really shaken up originally by Amazon, but now in so many different ways, particularly in the marketing, but there's lots of, the way they display, their smart changing rooms in clothing retail, etc. And then banking, every section of banking, similar to insurance, now has AI involved in that. And I won't go through these next slides, but just to give you an example, these are some of the AI companies in different parts within automotive, within insurance, within retail, and within banking. But what about pharma and biotech? Actually, we have AI in every part, and there's a lot more parts, I realize, but it didn't fit on the slide. But anything you can think of within our sector, really, there are AI solutions and AI being used in those. So I'll start with the discovery and the R&D and clinical trials and move then into some of the other areas like market access, etc. So in drug discovery, it's an obvious place that you would want to use AI because we have these huge databases, omics databases, etc. And AI can go through trillions of data points in seconds and actually make sense of it. So it's a clear example where there's going to be a lot of value created for our industry. I've put in green there, repurpose existing drugs, generate new drug candidates and design drugs, because when I put a note in our WhatsApp group, they were some areas people wanted to know about. And they reminded me of something I looked at a year ago, which was how is AI actually looking at helping create treatments for COVID? So this slide I put together in March last year, and it was very interesting because I went back to it yesterday and I realized I actually looked in the medical journals, and all of the molecules, drugs that it predicted would help with COVID actually clinically have been proven to help with COVID. So Diogen in South Korea was actually looking at what are drugs that exist that are going to be most likely to help with COVID. And it started with Tanzanivir and Remdesivir. And actually Remdesivir quickly got emergency FDA approval because of the results. Then if you look down the bottom, Benevolent AI also identified 6 existing compounds, one of which was baricitinib. And what I found in a paper yesterday was each of these drugs have had good clinical success with COVID. But what was even more interesting to me was that baricitinib from Benevolent AI and Remdesivir from Diogen, used in combination, was very, very good clinically with COVID. So that was interesting. But what might be of interest to pharma companies in the group is that in silico medicine, actually look at creating, in 4 days, they can create from thousands of novel molecules to filter it down to 100 molecules in 4 days that could, be a new drug for COVID, for example, but they could do that for any condition. And then Ictos and SRI Biosciences are two different companies that have joined forces. So Ictos has a deep learning model that will design virtual molecules, whereas SRI Biosciences have automated synthetic chemistry platform. So if the first one can actually find what the molecule is, the second one can actually design and make it. And so they actually can design, make, and test drug-like molecules in 1 to 2 weeks from scratch. So I think these kind of advances are going to really start to shake up our industry. So clinical trials, again, there's so many different areas that AI can be used, from designing the preclinical experiments, running them, designing the trials, recruiting for the trials, optimizing the trials, redacting personally identifiable information, and even writing the clinical study reports that are 90% accurate in an hour that previously took a week to do. So they still need to be checked and fixed, but it saves a lot of team time. So I will give some examples of how we've done recruitment for clinical trials, but there's multiple ways that can be done. And then, of course, regulatory is another area, reducing the labor, the manual work of collating the guidance, the regulations, even in pharmacovigilance, finding any mention of your drug online, and just really freeing up the human time to do the value-added areas. So I'm just going to do a few case studies. After the case studies, what I'm going to do is talk about best practices and where we are now and where we're going in our industry in the future with this, and then where I see pharma fitting in and how I believe pharma needs to change. So I put this one in. Now, there's multiple ways that we have done using AI with market access. One is pricing, and one is faster reimbursement. So you can do value pricing with AI as well. So for faster reimbursement, this was really a project where the EMA had approved a drug, and then it was looking at it was UK, France, and Germany formulary committees, NICE, etc. And so the client wanted to see if there was a way that artificial intelligence could impact the speed to approval from the reimbursement faster. So with this, and there was a lot of data, I actually yesterday had a look back at this project, at all the data that we used. You are really looking at, with each different country, what were the elements of the different previous drugs that were approved, and what was in the dossiers about that. There's a whole heap of other stuff as well, but basically you can then analyze on top of pricing, because obviously pricing is a big component, but there's more than pricing that's involved. Part of it, depending on the personalities in the group, what language you're using in the dossiers, there's a lot of different things that come into play here. And so you can actually analyze the factors that you need to incorporate in different formularies or country reimbursement bodies to hasten speed to market. And in this particular case, it was about 6 weeks on average that it was able to be sped up. So another one is early identification of patients. Now, this is the same technique we use for patient recruitment for rare, clinical biomarker cancers for clinical trials. But we did the same thing. This was more of for the marketing department, but it was a very similar approach. So this was a cancer product that was third line, but they treated it like a rare disease because most patients in this particular type of cancer died at second line. So the company was finding it really difficult to find where the patients were or were going to be. So for this one, they wanted to know which existing alive second line patients have a high probability of becoming a third line patient. So for this, we really looked at patient record data and identified any third line patient that had ever existed. So they could be dead now, but they existed at one point. And then tracked back and looked at what was different about these patients to the other patients that died at second line. From that, you can then predict which existing second line patients now have a high probability of surviving to third line. Now, because of privacy, we didn't know who these patients were, but we did have the doctor ID, so we could basically do a heat map of where these doctors were, who they were, so that the reps could go into those doctors and make sure that they were aware about this drug, so that when the patient got to third line, they knew that there was actually something available for it. This is another one, identifying rare disease, and this was a really interesting case. So we had a project where the client was spending a lot of time and money educating any physician that may come in contact with their patient. Now, these were ultra rare, it was a genetic condition, and so children were born with it, and they usually would die before they ever got to be a teenager. So getting to them quickly was important. But what we did notice is that their craniofacial features were quite similar because it was genetic. So we realized we could do a face recognition bot and put it online to scan any photos online to try and match where there was a patient. The problem with that is, how do you actually then get to them? So we didn't want to stalk them on Facebook or anything like that. So what we did is we used retargeting cookies. As you've seen, we probably wouldn't do that now because that technology is a bit old now, but in those days we used retargeting cookies. And so one of the things we found out from the language analysis was that the parents didn't realize there was anything wrong with their child until they went for potty training, and they couldn't get their children to potty train. And so we realized that's really, really valuable to know. So we did Google ad buys from the cookie retargeting, so that if someone who had put a photo online of a child with this condition then searched for something relevant to that condition, like potty training or runny noses, but not if they were looking for anything else, only if it was relevant to the child's condition, then they would get an ad with a picture of an age-appropriate child to theirs, so it would look like their child to get their attention. And so within 2 months, we had so many new patients because the parents had self-diagnosed, brought the information to the doctor, and had the medical geneticist. They were sent for tests, and they were found. So in lifetime value of these new patients, within 2 months, it was an additional 260 million. So it's a very, very, that I was thinking about this, you could kind of do this with a human, but you would need armies of people scouring the internet to do this. It would be a much harder job. And I think these kind of things where you can save time and do things so much more efficiently are a perfect example of using AI. I won't go into this one, it's a bit boring. Physician type, we can do precision physician targeting. But another one I put in here, just because I noticed some of the people who were attending, is we can use real-world data to really look at patient journey and the changing dynamics. So we've done this for quite a few projects now, where there was one client that had a blockbuster drug, and they had a lot of new pipeline products in their own company, but also competitor pipeline products. And they could see that because of these pipeline products, the whole treatment regimen was changing. And so they wanted to understand the dynamics of the changes of the treatment regimen. And they also wanted to know, are there ways that we can leverage the different points along the journey when appropriate for our drug? And what are the customer pain points? And how can we, find opportunity spaces for our new pipeline products that are not going to cannibalize our existing product? So for that, we were using longitudinal claims data, as well as medical record data. Sorry, my autocorrector's made it HER instead of EHR, and market research to fill the gaps. And we also did a job to be done analysis and size the segments, and then we were able to map where the opportunities were. I was looking back on this company and the work that we had done, and I discovered that it was on all of these drugs that we did were on the top launches of that year. So it's a very powerful thing to use real-world data alongside market research if you're starting to try and understand the patient and the doctor and what they're doing and what the changes in the algorithms are going to be. And then omni-channel marketing. So this particular project we did quite a few years ago, but we're actually doing one currently for a large healthcare agency that they're going to then resell as a subscription, I believe, to pharma. But what this is essentially, we already knew from previous projects about how to get the right channel for the right person and the right message for the right person. But then this client said, but what about the right message and the right channel in the right sequence at the right time by person? So that's what this was about. And so it was really, this particular client had 10 platforms of data that were consistent across all their brands. So we were looking at all key brands across 30 markets. And so they had things like Viva CRM data, they had Salesforce Chatter app, they had, what else did they have? Marketo automation from website, I think it was Brandwatch for social listening. So they had a whole heap of different platforms. And so what you can do with this is backtrace the digital footprint. It's a little bit like Amazon have done some of this kind of stuff as well. Retrace the digital footprint of the people that you know, and then the new people coming into the system, you can match up variables so you know what triggers are going to then lead to what information and what channel to send them to next. And this is also called context marketing. So I've got lots of examples of this, not in this presentation, but if anyone wants some information on it. So it's very, very powerful, because if it's done well, you as a customer don't know it's happening. You think, oh wow, that's exactly what I was looking for. It just is like just in time. So it's a really, really powerful thing to do. So we'll get coming on to the end bit, a few more things here. So we've got best practices. You know, there's so many AI projects that fail. And I really would like to stress that you really need to start with the customer experience and your business strategy first. I see so many companies in pharma starting with tech and then trying to find a use case. And that's the wrong way around. You need to really look at what is our problem or our objective, or what is the customer problem, or what are the customer needs, and how can we move the dial on the business by doing this? Obviously, cost reduction is an easy win, but I do find with our clients, they're much more excited by revenue increase, and you can get a really good revenue increase from using AI. But I also stress that you should plan your use case, your data sources, and your tech requirements and business case before you start. I've seen so many courses on Coursera and places by data scientists who say, just pilot anything. And people say, but what about strategy? No, just pilot. The problem is that data scientists have a very different mindset to business strategists. And so they're very curious and they are very technical. So they're more that kind of mindset, whereas with business strategy, we're trying to move the dial on the business. So it needs to be balanced between the two. So where are we now? I used this slide a decade ago and I just remembered it, so I put it in here to look back at it. Everything on this slide has happened. You know, the brain and neurosensors aren't perfect yet, but Neuralink is doing it, but everything else here is already here. So the future is here. But what about what other things we've got? You know, we've got precision medicine and gene therapy. You know, Roche did the Flatiron acquisition. That was an amazing acquisition for them, and it must be helping dramatically with a lot of their AI, with their drug development. We've got hyperautomation. We've had chips embedded in pills for a decade with Proteus. We've now got pill cams. Since 2017, we've had FDA-approved 3D printed drugs, Spiritam. We've got 3D printed organs, the heart. We've got digital therapeutics, neurosensors, eye sensors, you know, all sorts of things. But where I see the future, on top of a lot more digital therapeutics, is nanobots and quantum dots. So these are little robots that are smaller than a hair in width that you can put into the bloodstream that can then go and get rid of the cholesterol, go straight to a target cancer cell, etc. And I also think the big area of the future is digital twins. If you don't know what that is, it started with NASA. They created a digital replica of the space station in case something went wrong, so that they could replicate it and find a solution. Then General Electric did that with a power plant. And now, today, we already have digital twins of hearts and other organs. But in the future, and I'm talking way in the future, I believe everyone will have a digital twin of themselves, so that drugs, everything can be tested on a digital version of ourselves, just like we do with digital versions of cars in automotive now. We don't have to do a crash test of a car, it's all done digitally. I believe we will get to the point one day where we have that with humans. I'm just going to show you another really short video about where the future could be, but I have a slight difference.
What if you could hold the power of your health in your hands? You could recover from injuries faster, elevate your mood, and keep your immune system and bones strong by balancing your body. The future of your health is now with Q. With a tiny sample, Q gives you access to more information about your body than has ever been available outside of a lab, giving you the control to reach peak fitness for your body and your mind. Q gives you the power to see how what you do and what you eat affects your body at the deepest level, the molecular level. Q will make recommendations based on your body, your health, and your schedule. It's simple. Insert your cartridge, take your sample, and get results on your phone in just minutes. Q knows the food that will help you recover fast and protect your heart for the long run, helping you become your healthiest and strongest self. Q gives you the information you need when you need it, so that you can take care of the ones you love and have more informed conversations with your doctor.
I'll send the prescription over to the pharmacist at your house.
Yes, that's perfect. And alert others in your community so that you can act quickly. Q puts the power of your health into your hands, allowing you to make the best choices for the ones you love, your health, your life, and your future. This is Q.
Now this is very interesting because I showed this video in 2012 and Q existed then. I gather that they had a problem with the FDA. There was a problem approving it. They have had approval now, so it's actually on the market now. However, I think that the future is going to be not Q, but I think it will be a version of this kind of thing in our phone. And this is where I believe Apple probably could go, because if we have sensors that we can just plug into the phone, or even the phone has the sensors that you can put a drop of blood or a bit of saliva or something on, then that would mean that we could do everything that's here just straight from our phone. So it's and this is all possible using Q, but I believe it will be now probably moving into, the phone. But where do pharma fit into this? I feel that we are a bit too focused on our medicines. If you think about quantum dots and nanobots and digital therapeutics, the drug market is only going to be one part of what is currently the drug market, because digital therapeutics are being shown to be as effective as drugs in certain areas. And nanobots, again, the same sort of thing. So I think as an industry, we need to consider how we're going to look at what we're doing. If we only stick with drugs, then drugs will always be there. I'm not just saying there won't be drugs, but I believe it will be a smaller market than it is today, because there will be these other treatment choices. And if we then get relegated to just looking at being the drug section, we're not going to have as big a piece of the pie as we have today. And if you think about what we just saw in that video, where the patient will be able to diagnose and get treatment and all sorts of things immediately. Imagine if that Q had, if there were digital therapeutics, they could see what it was and then actually treat themselves with the therapeutic. So I think we need to think as an industry a lot broader than we are right now, for sure. And I had lunch with a friend of mine actually on Sunday, and she's an architect, and she was telling me, and this made me think of this, she's designing houses in London today that have a mirror in the bathroom that actually diagnoses any changes in your face, so it can alert you if there's symptoms of a stroke, early warning of a stroke and things like that. And it also has toilets that every day analyze urine and feces, and medically diagnose. So there's one company doing it, and they're putting it into houses in London right now. So if we have this future where you can get all of this information about your health, a lot of the conditions will be reduced as well. We won't have as much diabetes and things like that potentially, because people can get early warnings. So again, that's going to reduce our market. So I think we need to start seriously looking at changing our business model. And I've got a few thoughts on this because no one wants to do it. I think we have two choices. We can improve what we're doing now, or we can remodel. And I, of course, believe we should improve everything we're doing now. That's all of our work is doing that. But I also think that we need, as an industry, to start to consider remodeling at the same time, because I believe our opportunity for future growth is in that intersection between the remodeling and the improving. And it's very interesting to me because we do a lot of work with digital health AI startups for venture capitalists. And for those, we're always looking at what's going to be the most disruptive business model to turn this into a unicorn. Actually, we're also doing an AI model to predict unicorns. But I think pharma need to start thinking like venture capitalists do with their startups. What is the right business model to actually get this to be a unicorn? And we need to start thinking like that while we're doing all the things in our current business as usual with AI, getting drugs faster to market, doing better targeting, doing better marketing, but also doing that at the same time. So our environment is really changing, and we really need to think like Amazon. We need to put the customer first. If Amazon thought about books, they wouldn't be where they are today. If we continue to just think about drugs the way they are today, we won't become like Amazon. We need to put innovation and business mindset together, and we need to deliver strong customer experiences. So that's basically where I think the future is today. So, are there any questions?
Thank you, Shoma. That was fascinating. I mean, you've got us all in intensive thinking mode, Andree. A couple of questions, and there are a number of questions in the chat box. Before we come to them, a couple of things. First of all, do you have any information on where China is today in AI? Because China appears to be much further ahead than a lot of other countries. And secondly, the very obvious question, Andree, is this is really no rocket science. It doesn't look like rocket science today. But what is preventing pharma from changing?
Okay. The first question, China, very, very advanced, very good. I have a friend who started a company. He used to be at Porsche as a mathematician in the 80s. And then in the 90s, he started a company creating mathematical models to crash test Porsches. And now it grew to be a massive company, and all cars use it now. So I had a call with him the other day, and he's in Shanghai at the moment because he's invested in a company that are a startup, but basically they're creating a way for autonomous vehicles, no matter who makes them, to be safe, which is obviously critical. And he's put a lot of money into it, but so has the Chinese government. And the Chinese government are getting him to set up a safe city, an autonomous city that's safe. And so I don't remember exactly where in China they're doing it, but they're setting up this model city. So China and the Chinese government are very heavily invested in very innovative AI in all spaces. And then what is stopping pharma from doing this? Pharma are trying to do this, but what my conversations with people in innovation in pharma show is that the pharma boards have to deliver value to their shareholders, and they're very focused on business as usual. They want to change, but they don't know how to do that and keep things going as it is. And that's why I showed that slide. I think we need to remodel the business model, but I think we also need to improve our current processes. So we need to kind of do it together. But I believe it's kind of a mindset thing, because it is hard to envision. I mean, drugs will always be there, but I don't know if pharma boards are quite aware of some of the innovations that are going to reduce the pool of drugs for each of these conditions.
Thank you so much. There are a number of questions in the chat box. Who would like to go first? Jens, you had a few. Stuart, you also have been sharing your own patient journey. But shall we start with Jens first?
Yeah, thanks very much. Fascinating. And of course, it's always amazing to think about these opportunities. You mentioned the Roche and Flatiron thing. I was involved to some extent in that.
Wow.
It is complicated because simple things like signal to noise ratio, or Roche, the term was always meaningful data at scale. So can you get meaningful data, and can you get it at scale? These were the kinds of things that were holding us back a little bit. It was not the mindset. It was just that technically healthcare is pretty complicated, and it is kind of the function that you're trying to optimize is not like click-throughs on Amazon or something where you have a kind of binary outcome and you can run your fascinating analytics on these kinds of things. It takes a little time, but I'm optimistic we'll crack that. A very, very simple question here. I don't know whether, but I liked your idea kind of with the queue. And I always thought, when is this thing coming from my iPhone where you can put your saliva or something on that? And I remember there was a big contest in Silicon Valley a few years ago to kind of replicate this tricorder from Stargate, from Enterprise or so, Star Trek. So can you say something about how far are we? Because in COVID times with sensors and these kinds of things, that is fascinating. If I can just do the passive monitoring and then get more information about diseases.
Yeah, that tricorder one, I think it was from Omnicom, who did the $10 million prize for that. And I remember the first version of that a few years ago. I think they were able to, so for those of you who've never seen Star Trek, so there was Dr. Bones was the doctor on Star Trek, and he had this device that he could just put over, like scan someone with, and it would go beep, 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 beep. And so it would diagnose just from scanning with a handheld device. And so Omnicom put out a $10 million prize to basically recreate that, even though that was just in Hollywood. And the first version that came out, I think they were able to diagnose, I think it was around 15 different conditions with the scanner. And they have been developing additional conditions, the company that won that $10 million prize. So that work is ongoing, but it is actually producing results. So it's very interesting.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Stuart, would you like to share your patient journey and ask any questions that you might have?
Yes, this is fascinating. I'm so glad I woke up. I'm in Washington, D.C. So my story, I'll just do it in a nutshell. I have suffered, well, not suffered, I don't want to say. I've had to live with addiction for 25 years. And part of that addiction was being prescribed benzodiazepines for about 17 years, a high dosage of Xanax. And this past year, I've had to not only kick some illicit drugs, but also the benzodiazepines, which were originally prescribed to me for insomnia, and created an anxiety disorder in me that really did not exist prior to the prescription of those medications. The way this is just amazing to me, because I was looking at a Kickstarter campaign that was going to create a digital twin of the Amazon rainforest, right? And I thought, well, if we can create a digital twin of something so ecologically complex, why couldn't we do that with a human being?
Yeah.
And, I'm aware that there's, I use my phone all the time, and I know it can check my pulse and my heart rate and my step count and all these things. But I agree with what I think was alluded to in this presentation, which is that we have to go beyond just the medications, right? We have to look at people's behavior, especially in recovery from addiction, because so much of what addicts do is make choices. And we're not bad people. We just make bad decisions, and we tend to make them over and over again. Or in my case, I'm prescribed a benzodiazepine and I look to a stimulant to balance it out, and you get stuck in a loop, right? I also think that there's something interesting here, which is that during the process, the patient-doctor relationship is a very complex one. And I think that we're very good at prescribing medications to sort of band-aid the issue, but withdrawing patients from that seems to still be murky territory. And what I have found has been one of my issues in this year of recovery is that there has not really been a real, genuine, authentic, collaborative relationship with my doctors. And while that has caused frustration and resentment on my part, I understand that it's an issue for them because they don't really know. And they only know what I'm telling them, right? In early recovery, there's a tendency that, part of addiction is we're not being honest with ourselves. So if we're not being honest with ourselves, how can we be counted on to be honest with our doctors? But physiological and physical sort of indicators of where we are can help us to realign with our integrity, right? And so that a treatment plan might be, okay, put them on this medication to get through these emotional upheavals or whatever they are. But that medication regimen might change over the course. So 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, so that what happens is we don't end up prescribing somebody an antidepressant when they're not actually, they don't have the underlying condition of depression, right? What is happening is that benzodiazepine withdrawal from methamphetamine, or withdrawal from any of these things might create symptoms that mirror symptoms of depression, but are not a clinical diagnosis of a chemical imbalance. And I think that, that could be a very helpful thing too, so that we aren't taking profits away from the pharmaceutical industry. We're just saying, look, rather than make your profits by band-aiding conditions that can be fixed by changing behavior, let's design medications that can move us forward without re-addicting people and making them dependent on other things.
Well, thank you so much, Stuart. I mean, that's a very emotional and very open sharing of your experience, which is fascinating. A lot of food for thought in what you said. In fact, a lot of things. By the way, just as a kind of a sneak preview, in a couple of months from now, we will be having a session with a leading psychiatrist on some new therapies to treat mental illnesses. So, stay tuned for that. I'd like to bring in, if I may, Richard Stockfish, who's sitting in Portugal. He's actually a medical doctor. And Richard has quite provocatively put a question in the chat box. Should we not first remodel medicine? This is, Stuart, also what you were saying. Richard, do you want to expand on that? I don't know if you can hear.
I'd love to, Salman, and apologize I don't connect with video because I don't have a very good Wi-Fi connection right now.
I think you're just having a glass of really good Portuguese wine.
Well, that too, of course. But it is very much like, do we only look at prevention? Do we only look at therapies, or do we also look at prevention? When do we actually start to change medicine in a way that we look, that we treat, that we try to keep people healthy instead of only treating the sick?
I totally agree with you, and that was my point actually with the pharma. If we just focus on drugs, and even if we add digital therapeutics, etc., we're not involved in the whole healthcare process. If we can get involved in this earlier diagnosis side, I mean, as I'm saying, Apple and all of these tech companies are going to go into that space. I actually think, considering they don't know anything about healthcare and it's our space, we know it, we should be actually helping the patient stay well as all these other. I think we need to get much more involved in the whole healthcare ecosystem than we are right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think, it actually means, and that is still missing. That's something that Jens, we will be discussing one of the sessions with you, hopefully. I mean, the ecosystem has to change. I'd like to bring in Sania. I know that, Sania, you're traveling, and I'm not sure if you're able to ask questions using the iPhone. Would you like to, you had a question in the chat box. I'm not sure that Sani can probably hear us, but she probably cannot ask a question.
Yes, hello?
Hi.
I think
Hi,
I'm
Sani.
traveling. Yes, thank you, Salman. Andree, it was fascinating again. I put my question into this chat, so I'm going to put myself on mute, otherwise you would hear a lot of noise here.
Okay.
Is
okay.
in the same direction it was just raised by Richard. It is about early prevention and diagnosis, because I think this is what we would need very soon in healthcare. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
totally.
Sani is just asking, what is the possibility to use AI in prevention and early diagnosis? This is
Yes.
a little bit actually goes in the direction, Stuart, of what you were saying, and also, Richard, I think what you're pleading for. I mean, what is needed, from today's ecosystem to utilize the whole AI knowledge to bring us kind of, sort of forward and faster and hopefully also more cost effectively?
Totally. I think that there's a lot of work that's going on with startups rather than pharma, as well as Amazon. Amazon are looking at that whole ecosystem right now and making lots of strides. I think we've done some work with early diagnosis for a neurological condition where the patients were not being diagnosed for 10 years because, as you know, many neurological conditions, the symptoms are a little bit woolly. So we were able to basically get the diagnosis much faster, which was really important because by the time the patients were diagnosed, they had irreversible neurological damage that the drug couldn't really fully treat. So you can do things like that with AI, but I think we should be involved in a much bigger system, which you're all talking about, and which is what I was alluding to with Q. I feel like we need to get involved in that whole sensor diagnostics. We all had diagnostic divisions at one point. All the pharma companies had them, and then they sold them off. But really, diagnosis and treatment is like a lock and a key. We really should be getting involved in sensor diagnostics and all of the kind of diagnostic things that these startups are doing, or acquire the startups and bring them in. I feel like there's a much bigger healthcare ecosystem of wellness, predicting what's going to happen to keep a patient well before they become a patient, a person well before they become a patient, and helping them help themselves before it gets too bad. And I think if we get involved in that, it's going to be a much more, not only socially responsible, but a much bigger expansive business of the future. Whereas the way we are now, we're too insular and focused on a much smaller part of the system.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Sanfana, you have a couple of comments that you'd like to also pose some questions to Andree?
Yes, thank you, Salman. I was in touch with Andree before the talk as well, and this was a really very, very riveting talk, Andree. Certainly food for further talk. I would think that some of the innovation that would come from AI would come from a disruptive event, just like COVID, where it was used in real time to really try to bring together different combinations of drugs in an absolute emergency situation. And I could see further applications like that, like in remote situations where we aren't able to access patients, or where we do not actually, where the pharma companies have issues with recording patient data and we want to actually understand patient data.
Yes.
So I think, what Stuart brought up too, that a way of monitoring how people respond to treatments, how you were using it in clinical trials as well, being able to predict an adverse event and being able to find a way around it.
Yeah.
So do you think this is going to happen with disruption, or do you think this is going to happen with just a gradual move towards innovation? Because I think that AI can deliver a lot more to our healthcare than it is currently.
Totally. It depends. The answer to that, I think, depends on how fast pharma are going to move. I feel we could easily be disrupted. I've been saying that for a while, but if pharma start to look at the bigger picture and start to actually change themselves, they're still in a good position because we have all the medical knowledge, we've got a lot behind us. But I just feel if we don't do that and don't start to look at the bigger picture, we are very much in danger of being disrupted. We have so many regulations about privacy and data and all of the stuff that we have to comply to, whereas the big tech companies don't. And they've got and just as an example, I was having a medical, and the doctor had an Alexa on his desk, and he said, I love this Alexa, it's great. And I said, do you realize that you're against all data privacy here, because that data is going straight to Amazon with all my medical information? And he had no idea, and there's so many doctors out there that have no idea that Amazon actually record everything that goes on in every room that Alexa's there, and they get those recordings. You know, it's amazing how, you know, people don't realize, because of course, you know, the using Amazon, using Google, you've got agree to our conditions. And if you ever look at them, which I have, there's like 30, 40 pages of small print that no one's ever going to read. So yeah, if they have all that data and they use it, Amazon could easily disrupt pharma. So could Google, you know, they're working on it. They're both working on it.
It's interesting. What you're saying is, on one hand, the future is here already. And on the other hand, a part of us is still a little bit stuck in the past.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm a little bit cautious of time. Agi, did you have a question?
Yes, just a comment. I mean, I really think there's a lot of great insights from you, Andree. And myself working in digital health at Roche with CDS apps, that's actually something which I see that has a lot of future. And I also think that we should look more into prevention instead of redesigning the wheel, existing things that we have. But my question is very quickly around regulations, regulatory bodies. Where do you see the biggest challenges AI is facing currently?
That's a really interesting one for Europe, particularly because we're really looking at regulating AI in Europe. And I'm working with a business school in London, and we've been doing papers for the European Commission on AI governance, and it is a very interesting space. Most countries don't have it though, so that puts Europe in a bit of a disadvantage with AI, with data. So we're going to have a lot of constraints in Europe, whereas America and other countries won't have, at the moment, don't have those kind of constraints. So it's a hard one. I mean, I believe in that to a degree because, you know, of some of the things, the unethical behavior I've seen with Google, you know, I get shocked, and Facebook, some of the things they do with data. So I agree that there should be some kind of regulations, but it's going to have to be a, you know, give and take, a balance of some kind.
Exacting times for cybersecurity as well, right?
Absolutely. Yes, a friend of mine's company got attacked. She has a insurance company that got attacked recently.
Yeah, and I remember when I was in Singapore, the data breach, right, from SGH, Singapore General Hospital.
And there was one in the NHS about 3 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really big one.
In case you know, anybody wants to get in touch with Andree, you know, please do so directly. She comes back very, very promptly. I still have to learn the secret from Andree of how does she manage to work 24 hours in the day, and after that, for her comes the night.
Caffeine.
So she's she replies very quickly. So thank you so much once again for a fascinating presentation, and thank you all for your questions and your contributions. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody and thank Andree in particular. And Andree, we hope that we can see you very soon in Basel.
Yes, I hope so.
No quarantine needed here.
Hope to see you.
So all the best, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.